Bell Howell was a special edition of the Apple II Plus computer. It was released in 1979 and it was sold almost exclusively to schools. The first version was just the Apple II Plus. A later version included a special backpack which included power outlets as well as audio-visual inputs and outputs. This backpack also had a special kill switch which prevented the computer from being turned on if the lid was off. So let's take a tour of the inside of the Bell & Howell Apple II. And I've taken out the power supply just so you can see the power connections. So you can see over there the 3 wires coming from the backpack. And these wires just get plugged straight into the AC input on the power supply. And then moving over to the rest of the board, the Bell & Howell Apple II is basically an Apple II Plus, just with the different color and the backpack. So you can see we've got a Super Mod 2 to allow the Apple II to be hooked up to a television, and this is just plugged into the video output here on the motherboard. And then for the backpack, there's a couple different things that have been added. So we've got the wires coming from the speaker over here, and this is coming from the Apple II sound output, and so these run into the backpack, and then the backpack controls the volume, and the wires run back to the internal speaker in the Apple II. And last but not least, we have the game paddle inputs here, and if we swing around to the outside, we can see where the paddle actually plugs in, and these use these rather strange paddle inputs, the kind of DIN connectors there. And looking back on the inside, the last thing to note is that we have a shift key mod on this Bell & Howell. So you have the wire running from the paddle input here, and it goes over to the keyboard, so you can force the Apple II to go into lowercase mode and display lowercase characters. So let's go ahead and we'll put the top back on and see if we can fire up this Bell & Howell. So on the left hand side, you can see we have all the inputs and outputs for the Apple II. So we've got cassette in and out, we've got video out, there's actually 2 of them, we've got 3 audio inputs, and then finally we have outputs for the headphone and the speaker, and then we have volume controls for the 2 inputs as well as for the internal speaker. And unfortunately I couldn't get this side off. I was able to get the screws off, but these knobs have the tiniest Allen hex heads that I've ever seen. I think they're probably about 3/64 or something like that, and I just didn't have a hex key that was small enough to get them off. So we won't be able to see what's inside there. So here's what the right hand side of the backpack looks like. You can see we've got 3 outlets as well as the power switches. We've got an 8 amp fuse, and then finally we have the thumb screw, which when that's pulled out, then you can lift up the lid, but it also shuts off the power. So if we look inside, we can see that we've got the switches here, and we've got the 3 outlets right here. The switch to control whether the power is on and whether you can take the lid off is interesting. So you can see there's a little red switch back there, and when this thumb screw is fully in, then it presses down on the switch there, like that, and that allows power to be turned on, but if it's pulled out, then the switch goes up and it turns the power off. There's also a transformer in here, which is carrying power over to the left-hand side of the backpack, and that's probably powering, it's probably like a 12-volt transformer or something like that. I'm just guessing though, and it maybe is used to power the speakers on the left-hand side. I can't get the left-hand side open though, so I can't tell for sure. And then finally we have the wires that plug into the AC input on the power supply on the Apple II. And so here, for example, we've got the green ground wire, and these just plug, they're just terminals that just plug straight into the plugs on the AC input. Alright, so we've got everything hooked back up. Just a couple interesting little Notes when you plug the power supply back in, there's this cool little tab on the backpack that forces the actual switch on the power supply to always be on, because you wouldn't want it to turn off, because then you couldn't actually get access to it. That was kind of a cool little design feature of the backpack. So let's go ahead and we'll fire this up and see what happens. Alright, so we heard a beep and it booted up. It says Apple II, so that all looks good. Let's see, I can type. And let's see if Basic is working, which it should be. And of course you have to print your name thousands of times. Let's see. Cool. One thing you'll note, if you're paying attention, I'm actually running the Bell Howell Apple II with the top off, and that was not supposed to be possible. However, if you just unscrew the thumb screw over here at the back, take the lid off, and then screw the thumb screw back in, it re-engages the switch and you can turn it on without having the lid on, which is kind of funny. So it looks like everything is working properly on this Bell Howell. All I need to do now is try and find some cool old Bell Howell paddles on eBay, and then I'll have a complete system. So thanks for watching.